questions that I get a lot here on the Spector Creative channel is why I left Mattel after 10 years, since it was clear I really loved running the He-Man line and Matty Collector and all that jazz, and, I was obviously, in my element, a toy collector actually working on collector lines. What can I say? It was fun. The reason I left Mattel was I got an offer from Jakks Pacific, which is one of Mattel's competitors. My previous boss at Mattel was now working at Jakks. He'd left a few years earlier than me, and he asked if I wanted to come along as a director on the Big Figs line. It was an opportunity to work on Star Wars toys, which was great, but I also got to work on big toys, and that's what I kind of want to talk about today. Yes, it was, all the brands were really awesome, but there's something that's kind of magical about toys that are so ridiculously big that, well, they literally become something like a piece of furniture in your room. In fact, finding what the play pattern was for this was a bit of a challenge. But there is something about kids and big toys. I mean, it's not just me. Even, here's my daughter, scooping up a giant unicorn when she was a little bit younger. Plush obviously has a special place for large toys, but let's not discount plastic. All right, so I want to talk about this, and for this we're going to dive into my own personal history here. So you may be familiar with a Disney movie, Song of the South. Came out, decades and decades ago. There are some, racial issues with it, but for me, as a kid, it was just the story of Brer Rabbit. It was just a funny rabbit who would play tricks on people. In fact, this book here, my grandmother gave it to me, and I've had it my whole life. It's been one of my most treasured possessions, and it's because she actually glued bluebirds on all of the shoulders of the Uncle Remuses throughout the book, which made it really, really special. And again, I still have this. All right. So, when we did go to Disneyland when I was a kid, before we moved to California, back when I was in Connecticut, there we are on Main Street. I'm wearing a goofy hat. My sister's got the mouse ears. And obviously, very magical. I really wanted a big Disney stuffed animal as a souvenir. And everyone knows who are fans of Disney that Disney does plush in all sorts of styles, or sizes. You can basically get the same character in small, medium, large, and ridiculously large. And if you've been to Disneyland or Disney World or any of the parks really, Paris, Tokyo, etc., usually, not so much in the Disney stores, but at the parks, the giant mound of stuffed animals culminates in these Mickey Mouses. There's not one here, and I wish I could find a shot of, they're huge, they're gigantic. And I mean, they're so big that they're often bigger than the kid. And I was fascinated by this. I'd never seen stuffed animals so big as that first trip to Disneyland. And I was like, I didn't even know they came that big, like practically human size. Now, of course, I asked for one of these, and that really wasn't going to be in the cards for a couple reasons. I mean, pretty much the biggest one because it's so big. I wanted Brer Rabbit. He was my favorite character as a kid. And, again, I don't even think I'd seen Song of the South. I just knew the book from the stories that my grandmother read. I mean, the Joel Chandler Harris stories. And my parents explained that I was not Asian, I was not a girl, so I wasn't going to be able to bring home a figure on an airplane. No, it has nothing to do with being Asian and a girl. I just happened to find this shot of a girl sitting with a giant Stitch. The point is, I got this. I got a little Brer Rabbit. This was instead of the big one. And yeah, obviously I was a little disappointed, but hey, at least I got a Brer Rabbit plush. And I still have it here on my desk today. It's like one of my most treasured toys from being a kid. So, what is the obsession with giant things when you're a kid, especially giant plush? Well, obviously the larger-than-life friendly face is a big thing because it's like, ooh, there's somebody who can love and protect me that I have control over. Now, granted, big is not always friendly. I mean, if you go back with the Macy's parade, the farther back you get, kind of the scarier these giant balloons are. But it's a good example of how kids are absolutely obsessed with giant things. And it's all part of child's physical development. We see things differently than kids. Kids will see furniture and they'll see playthings. Kids will see giant things and they will see essentially not terror, but it's very imposing. It's the world is a huge place, and kids basically only have their imagination and play to try to find a way to, reach around this world and have some control. Being in a child's place, like these museums they have where everything's giant and makes you feel like a kid, that really is the best way to experience this. It's why kids are obsessed with things like giant trucks and giant buildings and, well, giant turtles. Because the Big Figs that we worked on at Jakks were really positioned as my action figure, my buddy. It was an action figure so big it could be your best friend and just hang out in your house. Now, this also has the perception for a child of making them feel like they have something very rich in a way. And it's why large figures are so popular with both kids and collectors. And honestly, why I jumped on the opportunity anytime I could work on a huge figure, like this anti-monitor we did at Mattel. Granted, it was a giveaway, not a toy we sold because it was so big, but the point is, anytime you could do something giant like that HasLab Sentinel, right? I mean, look at how much that just towers over a Marvel Legends collection. It draws so much attention to itself, and that's because of size. Now, traditionally, most large toys tend to be things like dollhouses, right? They're accessories to a figure or a doll line where they add an environment so that the dolls, the action figures, the cars, whatever it is, have a place to play besides just, on your floor. Heck, even the HasLab sail barge that came out a few years ago now, I mean, it's basically a barge-sized dollhouse, if you will. I mean, you could use it as a sushi boat if you wanted. But yeah, I mean, essentially you're buying a dollhouse. And with the Big Figs, these were kind of one of the first times you had plastic figures that were as big as Big Plush at retail. And they worked for a while when prices were, acceptable. As prices went up, it became a little bit more difficult. But the size did allow for some really innovative action features. Like we had a Batman at 20 inches who had a pop-out cape, and even a Batman at, 48 inches that had a bat symbol on his chest. This one that could shine out and basically be a nightlight. So the size itself obviously allowed for certain play features and different things that couldn't fit into a smaller figure, or at least could be done on a bigger scale. But really the thought was taking advantage of the obsession children have with large things, especially large things that are characters they recognize, and positioning it as an everyday toy. And this was a bit of the challenge because there's a difference between a toy you can play with on a desktop and a toy that's too big to do that. Now, the competitor, kind of looking at the Titan series that both Mattel and Hasbro do with Star Wars and DC and Marvel and all their characters, these are $9.99 low-cost figures, but they are big, at least bigger than a 5-inch or 6-inch. They're usually about 12 inches tall, 12 inches. The idea was of having the Big Figs kind of be a better option for these. And a lot of people, though, were just looking at the Big Figs and saying, but that should only be the giant characters. And that's where kind of the, I guess you could say, parting of the ways between kids and collectors. For collectors, we look at Big Figs or large action figures and say, oh, make Galactus and make the Anti-Monitor and make these huge things because that's what, a giant form factor is for. And that way I could take my 6-inch figures and have them fight my giant figures. And yeah, awesome for collectors. It's why HasLab has their giant Sentinel and giant Galactus sold online, not in stores. The reality check is this never works at retail. Just because a character is large doesn't mean it's going to appeal to kids. It's got to be a character they know that's large. So had Jakks had the Marvel license, you wouldn't have seen Galactus. You would have seen, Spider-Man or Iron Man. You would have seen the A-list characters done in large size, because these are the ones kids recognize. Yes, Batman isn't giant in real life the way Galactus is, or even, Hulk is not 48 inches tall, but it makes more sense to do A-list characters just in bigger size because it positions that character to be a kid's friend. Doing all of the sort of C and D-list characters in a comic universe that are large, they won't sell at retail. Unless a kid knows who this character is, there is no chance. So people say, okay, well, why didn't you do all the Ninja Turtles then? You only did Leonardo and Michelangelo. Wouldn't kids want to hang out with all 4 Ninja Turtles? And yes, in a hypothetical reality, of course they would. The reason Michelangelo and Leonardo were done, at least first, was, well, ye old toy spreadsheet, because that's what marketing reports are for. And Leonardo and Michelangelo are the top-rated turtles for kids amongst, when they're polled. And the idea of the Big Figs line was creating a figure that was so large, again, a kid could see it as their best friend hanging out in their room. Sure, it would have been great to have the other turtles. Why didn't we do Donatello and Raphael? Or a giant Krang, if you will? Well, because they don't sell. We could barely sell Michelangelo and Leonardo. They sold okay, but fans expecting things like, oh, you've got the ability to make big figures, so you should make the big characters. They don't sell. There is no way you're going to sell that at retail. You could barely sell Darth Vader and Michelangelo at retail. How in the world are you going to sell, Eternity or Kronos from, Marvel or Giant Krang? You've basically got to go with the A-list characters only, and then even in the A-list, it's got to be like the creme de la creme, meaning you have 4 turtles, but we can only sell the top 2. Yes, HasLab can sell a giant Galactus, but you will note, it is not at retail. It is sold directly to collectors. It's bypassing kids. And getting a retailer to skew something like this is difficult because they just don't have the space. It was hard enough to get them to take Darth Vader and, Leonardo and Mike. When a kid has a big fig, they feel rich. They feel like they have something that puts them in an elite class. And that is the emotional connection. So, yes, I never got my giant plush Brer Rabbit, but, I have my Galactus, and maybe one day, maybe I will go back and find a nice one on eBay to complete my childhood dream. But that's what the allure of giant characters are. They're your friend. I hope you enjoyed this video and it answered some questions to why certain big figs were done and others were not, and what the emotional connection to large toys is. If you like this video, please do share it with others. It's the best way to support this channel. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys next time.